everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for making it to day 2 of our Padyak Pilipinas workshop. So I'm Keisha Mayuga, part of Move as One Coalition. And today we're going to have some exciting speakers to talk about what we can do in terms of policy and how to plan for the long term for budget. And then later on, we're also going to have our breakout rooms with our different agencies who are here. So thank you so much to the DOTR, DOH, DILG, and TPWH for being in this workshop. So it's going to be really interesting because you get to consult whether you're an individual or an LGU. So yes, just a reminder to all to chat which room you'd like to be assigned to. So I'm going to put that up again in the chat. We have 4 rooms. So we have room 1, DOTR, Network Design and Implementation. Room 2, we've got DPWH for the coordination on national roads for cycling infrastructure. Room 3, DOH and campaigning cycling. And room 4, DILG, creation of local ordinance. So just again, chat here in our group chat what room you'd like to be in for our breakout rooms later on. Yep. So today we have some exciting speakers to talk about again, policy and budget for the future, because bicycle infrastructure isn't just for now, it's for next year and also the coming years. So I'd like to introduce everyone first to our first speaker, Carlo Africa of Hirayang Kabataan, to talk about People's Initiative. So Carlo, you can share screen.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carlo Africa. I'm from Hirayang Kabataan. I'm also a lawyer, and I'm also part of different NGOs such as Lente and Imagine Law. But for today, I'll focus in on the concept of people's initiative in referendum. But you need to really understand people's initiative in referendum. We really have to go through simple concept or basic concepts, particularly the question of how are laws passed. And in the Philippines, there are a couple of ways to actually pass laws, and we go through that. But the first thing we have to really understand or know is what kind of law do we want to get passed. And there are multiple laws in the Philippines, but for People's Initiative, for today's topic, we'll focus in on these 2 laws, particularly on legislative laws. So there are 2 kinds of legislative laws. The first is national laws, or laws that affect the entire country. And second are local ordinances, or laws that affect a specific local territory, be it a province, the city municipality, or the barangay. So when it comes to these laws, there are really 2 ways on how to pass these laws. First, we'll go through national laws. So a national law is usually passed, it starts off as a bill in Congress. It is either drafted by the House or by a senator, and then the bill is actually approved by our Congress together. Or so the House approves their part, passes it off to the Senate, and the Senate approves the bill, or vice versa. And once the bill is approved by usually a majority of our members of the House and members of the Senate, the bill is then sent over to the president, because the president will have the opportunity to sign the law so that it becomes a law, or to actually veto the law. So the president will have 30 days to decide whether he signs the law or vetoes the law because he doesn't want the law, or he or she doesn't want the law to be passed. If the 30 days lapses and the president doesn't veto the law is the bill automatically lapses into law. However, if the president vetoes the law, Congress will have another opportunity to pass the law if they get 2/3 of their members to vote on the bill to become a law. So this is the process that we all know when it comes to passing a law. It's really people would usually think our House of Representatives or our senators when it comes to passing our national laws. However, under our constitution, there's also another process called People's Initiative and Referendum. So it is part of our constitution, and there is an enabling law on People's Initiative, and it is actually a process wherein the people can pass a law without the need of Congress or without the need of the president's approval. So it is the purest example of the direct democracy, wherein you have people um, drafting their own law and making sure that and identifying the law that needs to be passed and going through the process of getting this passed with other people. I'll go through the process later on. But before going to the process, there's really two concepts here that's important. The first is initiative. So initiative means to propose and enact a law. So it will be upon a person or a group to draft their own bill and then to go through the process of getting the signatures and so that the bill will become a law. The second process or the second concept is the people's referendum. So here you already have a bill pending either in Congress or in the House, and then you go through the process of people's referendum to have the law be approved or rejected. But what is the process when it comes to people's initiative and referendum? And this really, I'll go through the general process so that you just have an idea. The first step is really for us to draft legislation or pick the legislation that we would want for our petition for people's initiative. So once you have drafted that petition, the next step is for you to gather signatures for that petition. There's a twin signature requirement required by our constitution and our laws. The first is that you have to get 10% of the national registered voters to sign in favor of your petition. So, for example, right now we have around 61 million voters registered back in 2019. We will require at least 6.1 million signatures for you to be able to meet this requirement. The second requirement is you have to get at least 3% signatures of the registered voters from every legislative district. So in this example, in the current set of the Philippines, we have around 250 legislative districts. So you will need 3% from each of those districts to sign for your petition. So you have to meet both of the signature requirements. And after getting these requirements, after getting these signatures, the next step is for you to give the petition to COMELEC, have COMELEC verify the signatures, and then COMELEC will organize an election called a plebiscite. And in this plebiscite, the people, all of the registered voters in the Philippines, will have the opportunity to vote either in favor or against your petition for people's initiative or referendum. But if you do get the majority of the people to vote in favor, then the proposed petition becomes a law. So that's really the process of people's initiative. Yeah. Wait, for local ordinances, in the same way, you have two. In the same way, there is local legislative councils, which acts as a counterpart at the local level for Congress and for the Senate. And you have legislative councils at the provincial level, at the city and municipality level, and at the barangay level. So in the same way, these local councils have the responsibility and the power to pass ordinances in their respective territory. And at the same time, you also have a local initiative and referendum as a counterpart to the national initiative found in our laws. So the local initiative and referendum have a slightly different process when it comes to getting it passed. However, you have the same concepts. It's a people passed law. It's a people passed ordinance. And there's two types. There's local initiative and local referendum. Initiative being the process of proposing and enacting a law, and referendum being the approval or rejection of ordinances. This is where you have a bit of difference when it comes to process. The first step is you draft the legislation or pick the legislation that you would want for your petition. And then you have um, you have to gather signatures initially for the petition. There's you will have to gather signatures twice when it comes to local initiative. But for the first petition, if you can see, for the first signature requirement, um, you will only need a minimum number of signatures for you to be able to pass the petition over to your local legislative council. For barangay, you only need 50 signatures to initiate a local initiative or referendum. And you only need 100 signatures for municipalities and 1,000 signatures for provinces and cities. As with the national people's initiative and referendum, these signatures must be from the registered voters of the barangay, the municipality, or the province and city. After you get the first signature requirement, the next step is really to file the petition over to your local legislative council. So this can be either your provincial council, your city or municipality council, or your barangay council. You ask the councilors to actually decide whether or not they will pass the petition that you propose to them. So the council will have 30 days to approve the petition that you have passed. So the law gives them the opportunity to pass the petition without having to go through, without requiring the group or people to gather more signatures and for COMELEC to hold a plebiscite. However, if the council does not approve the petition within 30 days, the people passing the petition will have now to give a notice that their power of initiative is being exercised to the local legislative council. And once this notice is given to the local legislative council, the group will now be required to gather a second set of signatures. So you can see the table here. For barangays, each petition will require at least 10% signatures from registered voters in the barangay. And you have to gather these signatures within 30 days. For municipalities, you will need 10% of the signatures of the registered voters and 3% from every barangay with a time limit of 30 days from the notice, from sending the notice. For cities, you will need 10% signatures from the registered voters and 3% from every legislative district, or if there's only one legislative district, 3% from every barangay. And the time limit for this is 90 days. And then for provinces, there's also a 10% requirement and a 3% requirement from every legislative district in the province. Or if there's only one legislative district, you have to get at least 3% from every municipality. And the time limit for provinces is 90 days. So this is different from the initial signature requirement because the initial signature requirement is really minimal because it is really for the benefit of our local legislative councils for them to see that there is an initial desire by the people, by the community to pass a particular ordinance for their area. So this will this will be for the benefit of both the legislative councils and the organizers so that they will not have to go through this second signature requirement, which you can see is really more burdensome. After submitting the petition, after getting the requirements, the group will have to submit the petition to COMELEC so that COMELEC can certify the signatures to be true. And then after COMELEC certifies the signatures, COMELEC will have to organize another plebiscite wherein they will ask all of the people, all of the registered voters, the city, municipality, and province or barangay, whether they are in favor or are against the petition. And if you get a majority of the people to vote for the petition, then the petition becomes an ordinance. So this is really the process of people's initiative and referendum at the local level. But the question then is, why haven't we seen more initiatives? To my knowledge, there's only really been one local initiative passed at the barangay level. And I think this was in Quezon City I think this was in early 2000s. But Other than that, I haven't heard of any initiative being passed, whether at the local level or especially at the national level. Currently, I think there's one initiative being done. I think this was in trying to get the franchise of ABS-CBN to be passed. So they're actually trying to use a process of people's initiative to grant ABS-CBN its franchise. And at the same time, there has been attempts before to make PDAF illegitimate and to ban political dynasties at the local level. So the question is, why haven't we seen more initiatives? And really the answer here is I think on 3 points. The first point is if you can look at the requirements, it's very burdensome. Um, it's easy to get 50 signatures at the barangay level, the 100 at the municipal level, and the 1,000 at the province or city level. However, the second level, trying to get more signatures at every legislative district takes time, and it takes a lot of organizing work. And more often than not, you have different organizations who attempt to get these signatures, but after a period of time, they lose momentum in trying to get more signatures. And the reason why it's hard to get more signatures is because there's really a lack of knowledge. People are not aware that there is such a concept in our laws and in our constitution. And because of that, it's hard for people to even think of this as a possible solution when it comes to passing our laws. More so in trying to organize a multitude of people towards this particular movement. And that's really the reason why we haven't seen more initiatives. But at the same time, there are things to remember when it comes to people's initiative. Um, it's You have to make sure that the ordinance is really within the power of the local legislative council to pass. So you can look at RA 7160 or the local government code to determine whether or not the ordinance that you want to be passed is within the jurisdiction or within the power of of a provincial council, of a city council, or municipal council, or barangay council. And there has been initiatives in the past that they were able to get the signature requirement, but because the power or the law, the ordinance that they want to get passed is not within the jurisdiction of the local legislative council, then it has not prospered in our courts and in COMELEC. So it's really important to make sure that the ordinance you want to get passed at the local level is within the power of the local legislative council you're trying to get it approved for. The second, it really takes time and commitment. It's easy to get a lot of momentum at the start, but getting more and more signatures, particularly the second requirement, the 3% requirement at the legislative district level, is really hard because it is an absolute requirement, meaning you have to get 3% at all legislative districts. So if you have just one legislative district or barangay or municipality wherein you have less than 3%, then you cannot pass, you cannot get the petition to be verified by COMELEC. So it really takes time and it takes commitment, a really committed group of people for you to pass the local initiative and people's initiative as a whole. And lastly, it's really important for us to really work with stakeholders within the area. And it relates to the second thing to remember that it takes time and commitment. But even though it seems like the People's Initiative process is adversarial to our local government, it really isn't because the process of People's Initiative, you actually see there, it will be good if you have a good relationship with your local government when it comes to creating the petition and giving them the opportunity to pass the petition on its face. This is because you know that at the end of the day, even if you do pass a law, you will need the buy-in of our local government to implement that law. So it's very important that even at the start of the process, you are already in conversations or with discussions with your local governments and with all stakeholders involved. Because it will be a useless law, even if it's a good law, if there's no implementation or execution of the law. So it's really important to really have that conversation with our local government. But at the same time, gathering all of that signatures, gathering all of that support will help convince our local governments that this is an initiative or this is an ordinance that is needed by our communities. And really, I'll go into why it's important or why the beauty of a people's initiative. And really, it's a discussion tool. It allows people to talk amongst themselves when it comes to a particular issue in our community. So you have a group of people advocating that this is something that we need. And because you are required to get signatures of different people, you are required to go around your community and talk to them and convince them to sign a petition because this is something that is needed. So you raise the issue. So you raise so you raise the so you raise the sorry. So you are able to raise the issue with these people and at the same time get them to sign the petition for you. And hopefully they too can become advocates for your initiative. And secondly, the process really requires people to create a community. So you talk with one another, you try to discuss what are the issues of our community, what are the issues that we see, that we feel needs to be solved, and what are the solutions that we need when it comes to our community. So that's the beauty of the People's Initiative process is it requires people to commune together, to talk with one another towards a particular focus or particular advocacy. And lastly, it's because it's really people centered. And I'd go back to the quote, a line in our constitution, particularly saying that sovereignty resides in the people and all government authority emanates from them. When it really comes to elections are really just a process of identifying people to whom the power is shared to. At the end of the day, power really belongs to our people, and come election time, this is just shared to the people or to the people elected in those positions. So people's initiative is a purest form of democracy, wherein you have people exercising their power in identifying what are the problems, what are the solutions, and what do we need to do to be able to achieve this. And it's really a law made by the people, campaigned by the people, for the people in the community. So that's really why the process of people's initiative is really beautiful, and it creates movements towards a better society in the Philippines. But the thing is, there's really just a few people who are aware of this process, and there are only a few people who can commit to this process. But it doesn't mean that we can't. I think if people are passionate enough, this is really a viable process to get needed ordinances done at the local level and even at the national level. Thank you, everyone.
Yay! Maraming salamat po, Kuya Af. Ayan, everyone. We have many unaffiliated individuals here and advocates who may be interested in starting a people's initiative in their own locality. This is most important, lalo na po para sa ating mga lokalidad with not so supportive LGUs. Our laws gives us another avenue to advocate for what we want by this people initiative we discussed ni Kuya Af. So a few reminders lang po before we go on to our next talk. Number one po, we'll open our question and answer portion after the next set of talk. So if you have questions for Kuya Af, tune in lang po or type them in the comment section. Pangalawa po, before we proceed, kindly choose your breakout rooms. So Ate Kisha has chatted the 4 options you can choose po sa chat box natin. She'll resend it again. Actually, she just resent it right now. So kindly message her po or the general group so that she can sort you out. Kung wala po kayong preference, you will be sorted automatically and randomly by Zoom. At pangatlo po, kindly mute your microphones while our resource speakers are talking. Ayan. Thank you very much ulit, Kuya Af. Now, let's go on to the second part of our program. Let's call on Ate Julia Nebriha from Agile City Partners and Sir Kevin Punzalan from Netherlands Embassy to talk about the funding and budget from local and international sources. Ate Julia?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So the group asked me to talk today about how we can budget for active mobility. And I've included some slides also from our colleague, Lou Gapuela. So thank you, Lou, for your assistance also on this. I'm sticking basically mainly to what has been mentioned in the DOH active transport playbook, which many of you might have already have access to and reviewed. So there, the implementation plan that is outlined is basically in these 5 steps, although it's not categorized like this, but it's to prepare, test, implement, monitor, and then evaluate. So we start with establishing the active mobility committee, convening rounds of consultations, developing the bike master plan, and training enforcers, for instance. These might be all the activities in your implementation plan that are in the prepare category. Then you would move on to testing your idea. You would be building infrastructure for pilot implementation and monitoring and evaluating that pilot and adjusting plans as needed before you move into full implementation, which is to scale up the infrastructure, institutionalize your plans, and implement other programs. After you do this, you would be monitoring and evaluating based on the data indicators that you've decided upon, and basically measuring whether or not your expected outcomes are true. And if you need to make adjustments, you can continue to do that over time. So these are the basic steps of the implementation plan that were outlined by the playbook. And I'll go through budget considerations that you should consider as you develop your implementation plan. So your active mobility committee, some of the things that you might need budget for as you are mobilizing this committee that is tasked to identify, establish, and maintain this bicycle lane network, as well as pedestrian pathways, might be that you have regular meetings and you might have site visits and regular monitoring activities. So you want to consider your venue expenses. You want to consider food and water for participants, possibly transportation honorarium. You will have 4 representatives from your civil society groups. So these people might need to be compensated to actually to physically arrive to your regular meetings. And you might also want to have printed materials. Although this does sound tedious, I think it's really important that we kind of go through these things, because you don't want to get to a point where you say, we have these great ideas, we have this important program, and we don't have the support to do it. So it's really important to think through everything. Capacity building and public consultations. So for capacity building, this might be primarily for the active mobility committee, but you might also be engaging other committees in your LGU, as well as hosting a number of public consultations that might involve capacity building, as well as you want to educate your constituents about these plans and programs that might be very new to them and might require additional education. So these could take the form of trainings, workshops, and other types of public consultations. So again, venue expenses, the materials that you're going to need, possibly honorarium for your speakers, whether that's going to be a minimal fee or some type of token. You might also need public announcements, either on social media, radio, or newspaper to announce these and share about these exciting developments, food and water, and printed materials. Your communications plan. This is outlined in a lot of detail in the playbook. It gives a lot of recommendations about key messages to specific targeted audiences. There's even a sample communication strategy, which is downloadable through the playbook, as well as social media cards and posters. So please check those out. Some of the key messages might include, for instance, that biking is healthy, safe, and easy. And the campaign might also involve public education on basic health reminders, personal safety, basic hand signals, and traffic rules. So here you would be looking at needing to have, if you don't already have in-house graphic design or other visual artists to help you to develop these materials. And if you need additional ones that aren't available for download on the playbook already, you might need film production if you decide to put out special types of filmed information, printing costs, and if you were going to pay for radio, TV, or print media exposure, as well as social media boosts. These are all things that would cost money. Events. One of the ways that you might try to get started with your implementation plan when you're still in the stages of designing and conceptualizing, testing and piloting is that you might have a series of events. just to start to build awareness, to start to build public support and engage your audience. So these could take the form of, for instance, a car-free day. Those are great ways. A lot of cities have done this. A lot of you are already doing it, to close a street and let people use it on a Sunday morning or during the weekend, throughout the day. You can put up a market, you can put up, demonstrated lanes, bike lanes. You can put up information booths to basically spread the word about what's to come. You could even host the public consultations in these car-free day events where you get feedback on certain ideas from the public. So these are something that cities around the world have been using this for decades to build the advocacy. Group bike rides are also very popular. If you're trying to get the word out about a certain bike lane corridor that you'll be developing, letting people know that this street is going to eventually have a bike lane or a extended walking path. The group rides or the type of tour events help to bring attention and also familiarize people with where the area is going to be for the project. And of course, bike lessons, free bike lessons sponsored by the LGU. These are a great way to start getting people who don't know how to bike or haven't biked in a really long time up to date, so they can be ready once the infrastructure is fully implemented. So some considerations here: your staff overtime. You might be understaffed for some of these activities, especially a lot of them happening on weekends. So if you need to consider your staff overtime, especially for traffic enforcement and security, this is something that you can definitely expect. Your staff meals and transport. If you're having any kind of performance, like a concert for your car-free day, or at the end of the bike ride or something like that, you might want to consider the talent fees, your stage and sound system setup, any type of materials that you're going to demonstrate the project, like signage, traffic cones, roadblocks, paint, posters, your public announcements. If you are not the LGU that's organizing, but you are a CSO, you would need permits or other fees. For instance, if you're going to occupy the street and you're going to take away the parking for the day, you will need to pay for those parking slots. Also, emergency services to make sure that you have a health response on site. So how about the actual infrastructure? In the playbook, there are 4 types that are covered. These are protected bike lanes and assigned walkways on existing streets, slow streets, people's streets, and safe intersections. So you might, I'm kind of going to cover it together, but depending on the phasing that you do, you might start with a pilot project, which is very likely. So you might start with lighter infrastructure at first to test out where you want to implement the permanent infrastructure, and see first over a period of time whether or not your expected demand is what you thought. Maybe it's higher and you need to have a wider lane or a wider pathway. Maybe it's much lower than you expected and it needs to actually be moved to a completely different street. Maybe there's unanticipated road conditions that popped up, and so you need to deal with that. Piloting something with less lighter infrastructure, doing something cheap, quick, and light is a great way to test it out before going in for the final investment. However, I would say that since your budgeting is on an annual basis, I would go ahead and budget for the estimated permanent infrastructure cost, and then you can just implement a portion of that, and again, still reuse those materials as much as possible in your final implementation. So just as an example, like this would be a very light approach. This is something that cities around the world have been doing during the pandemic. The next few slides, the images are all coming from the Streets for Pandemic Recovery and Response that can be downloaded for access for free at this link on the NACDO website. So again, if you see these images, you're talking about basic signage, bollards, like the plastic bollards or cones, and paint. So with that, very few materials, you can already create a pop-up bike lane or a sidewalk extension in high demand areas. As you move to more permanent infrastructure, you're going to be considering, for instance, possibly, road improvements in the pedestrian zone, the landscape or furniture zone, the bike lane, and the buffer. So you have a number of different zones that would involve different types of repair or redevelopment, as well as the more permanent infrastructure. So that's going to be your next phase towards a larger investment. The slow streets, again, is a very quick and easy. You just basically close this, you slow down the speed using signage and barriers, so people can still access the roadway, but they know that it is primarily at the speed of people. So this requires more on enforcement, on barriers, on traffic calming measures that can be done through very light materials as well. And then people's streets are streets that only have access for certain times of day delivery or residential access with very limited access, and it's primarily just for the use of people. So these might be play streets, these might be school streets. For some of you, it might be a market street. So these are, again, mostly on barriers, paint, very clear signage for entry points and exit points, and other delineations that are needed to make sure that there's a safe use of the space during, especially given the pandemic social distancing requirements. And then safe intersections. So here's a more pilot approach, a more, to test your intervention and to do something immediately. You might be reclaiming pedestrian refuge space at your intersections and more clearly demarcating where those crossings should be, with cones and with paint, and possibly even just cones. And as you move towards a more permanent infrastructure, like you see here in this NACTO example that's also in the annex of the active transport playbook, you would be extending your curbs. You would be, hello, yeah, you would be putting in permanent pedestrian refuges and also other types of signage. So this again is going to be a bit more costly in your budget than, of course, just the paint and the traffic cones. But you can start with one and then move into the other. And then this is also in the playbook, the bike boxes, which are basically just our paint. And later on, you might decide, of course, that this protected bike lane would have the bollards, or eventually a full barrier, a full barrier lane zone for other types of infrastructure, like planting trees. Get your green infrastructure in there for shade and for cooling. These are something that you might graduate to. So what is it going to cost? In the playbook, the average that has been communicated is 5 million pesos per kilometer. This includes the traffic barriers, lane marking, signage, and road pavement improvements. That's the average cost. So if we go to the breakdown, you can see that it can actually be anywhere as low as 2.8 million and as high as 7.9 per kilometer. So this, again, if you're looking at the more pilot approach, you might start with the first three: the traffic barriers, lane markings, and signage. And then as you decide to, you've finalized your plans, you're definitely sure this is how it's going to be, the road and pavement improvements would come in with the bulk of your budget, as you can see. Some other considerations that you might have in your program would be bicycle units and accessories. I know that some of you are looking into like bike matching or bike sharing in your LGUs, especially for essential workers, and also bicycle racks. So these are some figures that are also provided in the playbook. Some additional costs that aren't there that you probably want to consider, especially on a recurring basis, is of course maintenance. As important as great design is, maintenance is also extremely important. We need to make sure that the infrastructure is safe and is well maintained throughout its lifetime. So regular cleaning. If this is a new area that is not on the circuit for cleaning in your LGU, it needs to be. So extra costs need to be allotted for that. Regular infrastructure repair should be anticipated. So allow for a contingency, a percentage of the total cost to be allocated for regular repairs. This might include pavement patching, it might include replacing of signage, and it might also address, for instance, vandalism or any theft. For safety and security, roving security to ensure personal safety, as well as enforcement of traffic rules and CCTV cameras might be considered if they're not already in place for the areas where these projects will be, as well as electricity, which relates to, of course, safety as well, making sure that there are street lights. If there aren't street lights, please also include those, but that should be part of your infrastructure budget. The regular electricity that is also needed to support those street lights. If you're not using solar, please make sure that you budget for the electricity, as well as any public spaces where you might have bike racks, bike share, and other facilities. And then it's also mentioned in the playbook about incentives. So you want to encourage that private establishments would have installation of bicycle facilities, and also encourage businesses selling or manufacturing bicycles, light mobility transport, bicycle parts, or bicycle repair shops, whether these are going to be financial incentives or they're going to be tax breaks or some kind of other exchange. If they do require a budget, please consider that in your plans. So is this expensive? It is not. Investing in active mobility infrastructure is one of the best investments that you can make. It's actually 3 to 10 times cheaper than building a road for cars. So this is something that is financially, especially given the returns on health, on physical well-being, on safety, on providing inclusive mobility to all of your constituents, you get a lot of returns for a very good price. If you're looking at trying to find a benchmark of how much of your local budget you should allocate to this, just as a reference, the Commission for Global Road Safety recommends that 10% of your total road project costs should be allocated to road safety, and this is inclusive of the non-motorized transportation infrastructure. For monitoring and evaluating, you're going to be doing data collection, analysis, and reporting. So some things that you might want to consider here, and again, in the playbook, they give you a full sample monitoring and evaluation plan that includes your indicators, your targets, your methodologies, so you don't have to start from scratch. Some of the activities you'll be undertaking are most likely bicycle counts, monitoring road incidents, mapping of establishments of the network, of different types of data. And also, if you have specific programs like a bike share or bike lessons, you might be collecting data on the demographics of the people who are using these, number of trips used, and things like that. So you want to make sure that you have appropriate equipment. Hopefully you have computers, phones for the staff that's working on this. If those phones don't have sufficient cameras, make sure you have cameras on hand for documentation, as well as access to service vehicles for regular monitoring and going around to inspect these areas and collect data. You might also need special equipment in the indicators. There's something about air quality. I'm sure that probably most of you don't have access to your own air quality monitors, so that might be something to also consider if you don't already have access to. And then, of course, any software for analyzing, the training for all of these different activities, and the manpower. Often there's not a specific office dedicated to these tasks. So make sure that you have the right support. Where is this money supposed to come from? Generally, the assumption is that this is coming from your ERA, but there's also other sources for you to consider, such as penalty fees from other traffic violations could go into helping to fund these initiatives. If you have local parking levies, this is also something that can help a lot of cities around the world pay for these types of projects, bike lanes, extended walking paths, any of these free programs for the public, they pay them through parking levies. Some of you might still be working on your proposals for the last years of funding of the DBM Local Government Support Fund. All of these projects will still qualify under that, so perhaps there's still an avenue open for you. And then, of course, any other funding that's available from other NGAs, like the DOH has a grant program for LGUs on some of this infrastructure, so that's definitely worth exploring. You might also, of course, be looking at sponsorships. Typical sponsorships for these types of projects would include paint, for instance. A lot of local agencies and national government agencies are working with paint sponsors for these types of projects, which are highly visible in the community and really beneficial for the community. So you could be looking for those types of sponsorships. Meals and water for events. This is something that can often be sponsored, as well as the tokens for your giveaways like t-shirts, and even printing of materials like on tarps. That can also be sourced through sponsorships. Of course, I know a lot of you also reach out for volunteers or pro bono work for performances, graphic design, logistics, or other types of services, and partnerships with institutions. So you might partner with an institution to borrow a venue to host an event, or you might borrow traffic cones or other types of road barriers from one of the agencies. You might be borrowing tents also from some of your departments. These are all things that help reduce on your overall costs. And of course, if you can find media partnerships, that also helps you in getting your communications plan out in an affordable manner. With sponsorships and this kind of supplemental sources, make sure you start early. It takes time to build the partnerships and reach agreement, and make sure, of course, that the parameters are clear and that expectations are met among the partners, especially as you're working with CSO groups and you're depending on volunteers and you're asking people to do things for free. Make sure you respect their time and their efforts, and make sure to give the due credit to everyone. Your biggest asset in building your partnerships is really that you're creating a community, and that community is going to come to bat for you. They're going to back you up. They're going to be there for you throughout all of these projects through the years. So building this community of support for your active mobility projects is a major asset, probably more valuable even than the money. Why should we be doing this? So you might have a lot of accomplishments that you want to reach for your LGU that you set for the year. But generally, just excelling at public service is a major motivator, I think. And doing the local budget really well for these for the active mobility projects will help you to meet a lot of your public service targets. So how will this be done? Fulfilling the local budget requirements, for instance. There are certain percentages that are supposed to be allocated in your local budget, for instance, to gender and development. That's 5% of total annual LGU appropriations. These types of projects, the active mobility, with so many, women and children and youth, for instance, also using active mobility to go about their essential daily trips. These are all projects that can be counted under these types of funds and help you to meet these percentages that are actually required by law. You also have the protection of children, your local development spending, senior citizens and persons with disabilities, and local disaster and risk reduction. So these are all areas that are supposed to have percentages of your local budget allocated to projects that support these specific thematic areas, and active mobility projects can really touch on all of them. Also, going after the seal of good governance. I'm not sure exactly of everything on the scorecard for this year, but I know that generally these are areas that might, you might be able to score points on and get something on the assessment criteria for the seal of good governance. And if you actually hit all of those, you'll get a financial incentive through the SGLG fund. So please check those out. And as you're designing your implementation plan, think about how they can help to satisfy the criteria also for the seal of good governance, which hopefully is an incentive. And then, of course, meeting the SDGs. We're required as a nation to meet the SDGs. This executive order has been drilled down to the LGUs to also implement the SDG framework. And just to give you an idea, active mobility investments help cities to meet their SDGs commitments. Transportation directly contributes to 5 of the targets and indirectly to 7 of the targets. So I just want to say that I think, there's no losing in this situation. It's a win-win-win all the way around on the public service you provide to your constituents, on meeting your commitments at the local and national levels, and of course, providing a better quality of life for everyone at a very great, affordable price. Thank you very much. Please reach me here if you have more questions about some of the budget items and design. And you can reach out also to Lou at this email address if you have more questions on any of the legal or policy directives. Thank you.
Yay! Thank you very much, Ate Julia. Ayan. So, sabi nga ni Ate Julia, our building road for cars is 3 to 10 times cheaper. Not to mention the parking, sobrang mura. So, ang dami niyang forward na different sources that you can access. If you want to more information about it, you can ask our government agencies later in the breakout rooms. So, a quick announcement before Sir Kevin. Breakout rooms will start roughly around 3:10 to 3:15 because we're running out of time and will last for 45 minutes instead of an hour. So, for those with questions, we're very sorry. Pero papatype namin siya in the chat box because we may not have time for a live Q&A unlike yesterday. So our resource speakers will answer your questions via the chat box. Okay, let's now transition. I'll call on Sir Kevin po para i-discuss ang ating funding sources naman internationally.
Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. Some of you may already know me, but for those who haven't met me yet, I'm Kevin Punzalan, and I'm the Senior Policy Officer for Economic and Public Affairs at the Netherlands Embassy. I think Julia did a great job in the previous presentation of talking about what resources and instruments and knowledge are available for all local governments to use in creating bike infrastructure and good bike policy. And what I hope to do with my presentation is to also fill in the gaps about where else we can find instruments to help in capacitating local governments, as well as in looking at specific technical solutions that might be useful for your respective local governments. So that's basically going to be the focus of my presentation. It's going to be a bit narrower than Julia's, but I hope that it might be useful for some local governments that want to know what the Netherlands government has at its disposal for promoting sustainable transportation. So I'd like to start with showing you as well pictures of what cycling as an experience is like in the Netherlands. As you can see, there's a lot of dedicated cycle paths in Dutch cities and in the countryside. They also design intersections to be as accommodating as possible for cyclists and pedestrians. So that's just a small picture of how it's like. Okay, next slide. So let's start first with why the Netherlands is interested in this. So the reason why we're quite active in promoting cycling and sustainable transport is because we wish to help countries advance in achieving SDG 11, which is sustainable cities and communities. You heard earlier as well from Julia about how promoting cycling and active transport helps create healthy cities and communities. and where establishing a hierarchy of putting cyclists and pedestrians ahead of cars leads to safer and more livable cities, as well as in reducing air pollution. So, in a nutshell, that's why we want to promote cycling. Now, as to how we're going to do that, we have a methodology for dealing with interested parties. First of all, we like to discuss with each of your respective sectors what the issues are for active transport and sustainable mobility. And then from there, from our initial discussions, we like to identify opportunities for collaborating with you. Now, when we identify specific topics or issues or problems to work on together, we like to also bring in to the fold the Dutch Cycling Embassy. The Dutch Cycling Embassy is a specialized knowledge institution. They're actually a federation of local and provincial governments in the Netherlands, of academic institutions, as well as private sector companies. And they are able to help us identify what kind of experts would be most relevant to your concern or your issue or your problem. And then from there, we try to identify the type of intervention that we can engage with you, whether it's in the form of providing technical assistance or using public diplomacy to raise awareness of promoting sustainable mobility, or even policy advice in terms of how to regulate, for example, transportation policy. So let's get down to the heart of the presentation, which is what kind of instruments are available to help promote cycling, particularly from the Netherlands government. So what's interesting is that about this is that the instruments that the Netherlands has available are actually seconded to our embassy. The main institution offering them is the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, which is a specialized institution that promotes and supports entrepreneurship by Dutch companies abroad. So, as such, the instruments are designed to promote business interactions between the Netherlands and partners in the Philippines. So, broadly, we have three kinds of instruments that we have available for promoting sustainable transport. They include subsidies for feasibility studies. If you would like, for example, to design a new type of cycling infrastructure and you would like to first determine what the cost would be and what resources would be necessary for that. It can also include capacity building and training for local governments and for the private sector. So, if, for example, your urban planners need to be trained about how to create good cycling infrastructure, if they want to pattern technical standards after those that are used in the Netherlands and elsewhere in the world, there is funding available for that. And this applies to both local government authorities as well as for private sector companies that would also like to offer these solutions here but need assistance in upgrading their technical skills. And finally, there is also funding available for creating networking and engagement events between Dutch private sector experts and Philippine counterparts. So those are the three broad categories of instruments. I can go now into detail about the instruments themselves. So the instrument I'd like to share with all of you is something called the Private Sector Development Apps, or known by its acronym as well, the PSD. So the PSD apps are originated by the Netherlands Embassy, and we in turn submit applications to the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. The purpose of the instrument is to strengthen the local, meaning the Philippine private sector, with Dutch knowledge and to strengthen the business enabling environment. Now, in order to create a proposal, we would recommend that interested parties propose a concept note to the Netherlands Embassy, and then we in turn will develop the proposal together and submit it together to the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. So there would be a dedicated policy officer that would work with you, and in this case, that would be me. So, what are the types of PSD apps? So, they come in a wide range of instruments. I'd like to share each of them with you because they apply in certain cases to different recipients or beneficiaries. Other instruments have varying purposes as well. So, the first is what we call the G2G app. This is the kind of instrument where Dutch government organizations exchange knowledge with foreign counterparts and provide technical assistance to local government organizations. So in this case, if you would like to learn from example from what a Dutch city, like for example, like Utrecht or Rotterdam or Groningen is doing in terms of its cycling infrastructure and policy, and you would like to learn from their example, you can use the G2G app. The second tool is the K2K app. This is where Dutch knowledge institutions and or higher education institutions share knowledge with foreign counterparts and work together to solve problems relevant to the Dutch aid, trade, and investment agenda. So, an example of a Dutch knowledge institution would be, for example, the Dutch Cycling Embassy, or could include a university like the University of Groningen. And you can tap their knowledge to help develop solutions to specific problems that the private sector faces here. For example, if we take that picture and look at the kinds of asphalt used, how a potential problem could be how do you apply colored asphalt standards to a tropical monsoon climate like the Philippines? If you pose that question, then a K2K partnership between, let's say, the Dutch Cycling Embassy and an institution here might be the answer for you. Now, more broadly, PSD apps can be used to fund a variety of studies. These include market entry studies, mean to say to test, for example, whether a new type of technology or product would be well suited to this market. They can be feasibility studies for testing out technologies or solutions in the Philippine context. But it's not limited to these categories, as other studies can also be funded as long as they help facilitate uh, means by which Dutch companies in a specific sector can overcome obstacles or find a way to integrate into the local business climate. So, next to that, we have trade promotion events, which is pretty simple. The PSD app can be used to fund fairs or business events that have a relevance or connection to development. So, in this context, with COVID, of course, being a reality, these can be used to fund online networking and matchmaking events as well. The matchmaking service is offered to companies, NGOs, and government bodies looking to form a partnership with Dutch public or private parties under the PSD program, as I mentioned earlier. And finally, the PSD app can be used to fund seminars or roundtables on a variety of private sector related issues. For example, a roundtable can be called to promote a strategic discussion to address obstacles in the market for, let's say, bringing in more advanced sustainable transport solutions. Now, that's quite a lot of knowledge to absorb, and I'm sure that the all the use of this jargon will not help. So to help make things a bit clearer, I'm going to show you some potential examples of what a PSD app could look like. So in this slide, you can see a picture of a bicycle lane with a defined standard width of about 225 centimeters. So
Tapos pag pinagsabihan mo, masama ka na naman.
So Dutch experts can be called in to look and study the roads in your respective LGU, and to determine what the recommended bike lane widths can be, in addition to what kind of pavement can be used for your bike lanes, depending on the local context. Another example is Dutch experts could be called in to design safe intersections for cyclists. So I'm showing on screen an example of a Dutch-style protected intersection, which actually allows cyclists to turn right without coming into conflict with car traffic that's also turning. It also promotes safety by encouraging cars to stop before the cycling and pedestrian paths as a habit as well. Beyond that, the PSD apps can be used to fund K2K events. So I'm showing on screen an example of that, which was the Iloilo Think Bike workshop, which the Netherlands Embassy organized in October of 2019. The workshop focused on a group of municipal and provincial urban planners, private sector participants, as well as local cycling advocates, and was focused on training them in terms of how to plan a bicycle network. So it went beyond just deciding uh, where the path should be or how wide they should be, but where how they should connect different points of interest in the city. So we got a lot of positive feedback from that event, and I think it's a good example of a K2K event. So these examples conclude my presentation, but I know that there might be a lot of questions coming from you. So I'm putting my contact details on screen where you have my email address, and we also have the Facebook and Twitter pages of the embassy at NL in Philippines. So if you have any questions about the instruments or if you'd like to submit a concept note, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I think that concludes my presentation. Thank you again to the organizers of Padyak Pilipinas for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you so much, Kevin, for that wonderful presentation. I know we all have our questions, but we can save them or we can chat them. We can put them in the chat. So now we'll go to the most exciting portion of the program, which is really the breakout room. So I'll just explain a little bit of what we're going to do at the breakout rooms. So again, we have 4 breakout rooms where we have one agency each assigned, where you can ask questions to them, or you can even engage the individuals and LGUs on their experiences based on the topic. So again, reiterating, for room 1, we have DOTR, network design implementation, room 2, DPWH, coordination on national roads. We have room 3, DOH, campaigning cycling, and room 4, DILG, creation of a local ordinance. So I've already assigned everyone their respective rooms, and for the people who are in our Facebook Live and watching on our Facebook Live, unfortunately, we can't do a live of all of the rooms. So we'll have to say goodbye for now for our Facebook Live. And for everyone else here participating, don't worry, we will send you all the materials from days 1 and 2 of the workshop, including a recording of this workshop, to your emails. And we hope that it's helpful. So if you have no more questions, I will assign you now I will open the breakout rooms for everyone to be a part of. So in each breakout room, we will have a facilitator who is assigned. So the facilitator will introduce our agencies represented, and they will take in your questions. So excited to hear about what's going to happen in each of the breakout rooms. I'll be hopping in every now and then. And without further ado, really, I will open now the rooms for everyone to go in. So see you all after the breakout rooms for 45 minutes. We will call in everyone here again for general questions, or maybe like a summary of what our biggest questions are on the next steps to really push for cycling culture here in the Philippines. So again, opening the rooms now, 3:15. See you in 45 minutes, everyone.
Thanks, Ate Kisha.